Story 1. I feel like I am waiting for a plot twist in a show that forgot it was a comedy and has turned into a political thriller. Story 2. I was impressed with the turnout for day 1 of advanced voting. This makes me happy because this election is critical and important. Story 3. I voted. I hope turnout is much better than it has been. It's ridiculous that only 60% of eligible voters participate, and the government is decided by only 32% of that. Story 4. I am in Poilevra's riding, which borders Kearney's riding. Turnout was high for early voting yesterday, and they seem to have the lines under control. We are also experiencing the longest ballot mischief with 91 names on it. Old ladies we met in line were comparing their heights to the length of the ballot. Story 5. I don't like the degradation of politics. I always believed that politics should not resemble show business, characterized by flashy catchphrases, trick moments, and a lack of respect. I am concerned that we observe this increasingly. Story 6. Anxious to see if the polls have changed since the debate. I thought the candidate did very well to not appear as aggressive and mean as he does in the House of Commons. I work for a member of the Liberal Party, so I obviously want them to win. I voted yesterday, and it took around 30 minutes. Story 7. I feel that individuals voting Conservative are unaware that the past Conservative Party in power sold out Canada to China with the Canada-China Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement. This agreement allows for Chinese investment in Canadian businesses and housing, causing our housing prices in the lower mainland of British Columbia to skyrocket. There is little that can be done about it because the agreement allows Chinese investors to sue Canada for discrimination. The worst part is that the agreement cannot be rectified until 2045. Harper signed this agreement in 2014, and the Conservatives have been blaming the Liberals ever since. Story 8. I wish we had a Conservative leader who never speaks about abortion, LGBTQ matters, gender issues, or social justice on their platform again. We decided on these issues years ago. Let's move forward. Social issues are a distraction when every other issue can benefit everyone and improve lives, regardless of gender or race. Story 9. I usually vote for the New Democratic Party, but I strategically voted for the Liberal Party this time because I want to do everything I can to stop Milhouse from becoming Prime Minister. Story 10. I have lived through Conservative and Liberal governments in my 40 years in Canada, and to be honest, I don't feel any major changes in my day-to-day life when a new government comes to power. Liberal or Conservative, I still have bills to pay and chores around the house. I make it a point to vote in every election, as it is a citizen's responsibility. I have voted for both parties in the past, but I have never felt strongly one way or another about who won. But now, not this time. I cannot support Pierre Poilievre and his followers. I will not accept Trump-style politics in my country. Conservatives can do what they want, but I will be voting Liberal from this point forward. Story 11. Feeling like Kearney is going to win, but it's still worrisome. The political party has too many talking points from former President Trump, and I really don't trust any right-wing government around the world at the moment. Additionally, the right-wing supporters in the United States who back him are not encouraging at all. Kearney is a serious and intelligent person with solid plans for the future. It honestly feels great hearing him speak and discussing plans to build Canada up and invest heavily in this country. I think a financial expert is just what we need during a trade war with America. Story 12. I am in rural Alberta, in a safe Conservative riding. Elections always make me feel hopeless. The Conservative candidate does not try because they know they are going to win. No other party tries because they know they are going to lose. On the big day, we all go in, vote Conservative like we have for the last 50 years, and go back to complaining that nothing ever changes. Story 13. Optimistic Canada has a genuine opportunity to emerge as a shining city on a hill that the United States has abandoned, and Mark Carney is the ideal candidate to lead that shift. Story 14. I voted by mail 2 weeks ago and feel hopeful. My biggest priority is the tariffs and having a prime minister who acknowledges my transgender daughter's existence. Story 15. I want this election to be over. The anxiety is overwhelming. I sincerely hope Carney will win, though I typically vote Green or New Democratic Party. However, the progressive conservatives' rally and talking points are unsettling me. Story 16. I hope that Poilievre resigns. I am not interested in his brand of politics. In my opinion, his loss would be better for Canada. Story 17. I'm frustrated that my riding, Pitt Meadows Maple Ridge, will re-elect the ineffective Mark Dalton. He has been the incumbent Conservative Member of Parliament and has done nothing for our community except fill our mailboxes with junk mail. Angie Rowell, the new Liberal candidate, actually seems to have helpful credentials and professional experience. However, since Maple Ridge is an enclave of right-wing support that does not prioritize local government assistance, the majority will likely vote for Dalton. Story 18. I voted yesterday in the advance poll. Mr. Carney is the only adult in the room. Now is not the time to be handing the keys to the kingdom to someone who has never had a real job, advocates for plastic bag freedom, and decides which news outlets can attend his big rallies. Hard no. Story 19. Concerned. In a rational world, we would vote for a sensible conservative government that would assess the overall situation after 12 years of liberal governance. This is not because liberals are inherently bad, but because democracy is not a team sport. It is not simply a line you walk between the left and the right. It is a pendulum. It must swing, or the entire system ceases to function. It swings to the left and it swings to the right. If you react with anger because it did not swing your way this time, remember, it swings to the left and it swings to the right. Currently, we do not have a reasonable conservative candidate. We have someone who seems too closely aligned with Trump to be trusted. This raises further concerns about how the United States might attempt to influence our elections. Are our elections secure, or are they fundamentally compromised like those in the United States? I voted early and I am glad I did. Wait times ranged from 1 to 4 hours in various locations across the country. There was no liberal candidate in my riding, only conservative or green options. My decision on whom to vote for was influenced by tariff wars and threats of annexation, rather than by who I believed would be best suited to lead for the next 4 or more years. I deeply resent that. My greatest concern is that our electoral process is compromised, and that someone willing to capitulate to Trump could become prime minister. He might then attempt to undermine Canada as Trump has been doing in the United States. How many billions in back-channel proceeds do you think Trump is offering to any world leader who aligns with him? If he manages to establish a sympathetic government in Canada, it would be a very bleak situation. The constitutional crisis is spreading. If you are a Canadian eligible to vote, you must participate in the election. If you have concerns about the situation south of the border and choose not to vote, you are complicit. Voting is one of the strongest tools you have to sway the pendulum in the right direction, and failing to cast a ballot is akin to voting for the wrong choice. Story 20. I feel uneasy. We need change, but the current conservative movement is far too inept to properly lead Canada. I find it hard to trust the Liberal Party to fix its own mistakes. The New Democratic Party is unlikely to win, and their leader is not very likable. I am also tired of attack advertisements. These individuals are frustrating, and no matter what happens, I just want a better life for everyone. Story 21. Not great. I live on Vancouver Island. The Conservative candidate in my riding, Aaron Gunn, is not pleasant, and he is projected to win by a large margin. Story 22. Feeling cautiously optimistic. I voted yesterday and am really rooting for Carney. The polls are looking good with a fairly consistent Liberal lead. However, I am still concerned that the Conservatives may win, which is a terrifying prospect given their proposed policies. Story 23. Everything Conservative voters say about Liberal voters, they are often guilty of doing the same thing. There is a bit of the opposite, but not nearly as much. It is comical yet sad. Story 24. I am very concerned. People are voting for the Conservative Party, thinking they want change. They forget that the new Conservative Party has ties to neo-Nazis and has fired 26,000 scientists for promoting climate science. They support the truckers' convoy organized by certain political groups and foreign influences, using the notwithstanding clause to remove transgender rights in healthcare. They have discussed using the notwithstanding clause to restrict human rights when it fits their agenda. They have suppressed media access during the election. When last in power, they closed refineries on the East Coast and shuttered fisheries, while increasing catches for offshore companies from other countries. They do not plan on balancing the budget and are making significant cuts to many programs. Their plan involves privatizing universal healthcare and implementing a multi-tiered healthcare system. They intend to raise prescription drug costs and hand over government land to private developers to address housing issues. Additionally, they will roll back protections for the LGBTQ+ community and women's healthcare rights and freedoms. So yes, I am genuinely worried because many others refuse to understand the implications as it doesn't affect them directly. Story 25. Worried. Poilivra is part of a pattern. People are tired of the outdated neoliberal system, and this figure comes along who seems pragmatic and straightforward, and his solutions seem simple. If he gets elected, he will probably turn out to be a bought and paid-for cog in the machine who doesn't care about the people and their well-being. The policies he has supported speak for themselves. Look at his achievements and tell me whether you think he will look after average people or whether he is an oppressor serving the interests of corporations and the ultra-wealthy. He is a snake in the grass who presents himself as the adult in the room. Story 26. I am really anxious thinking about my future under a conservative government. Even under liberals or the New Democratic Party, life might not be much better, but the Progressive Conservative Party is bringing Trump-style politics to Canada, which I find very concerning. Story 27. I hope Canadians learn from our example and the disaster it has caused for ourselves and the entire world. Poilivra is Canada's equivalent of Trump. Story 28. I hope that Canadians will show the world that the tide has turned and that Western democracies are ready to soundly reject the toxic regression of right-wing populism. Story 29. I'm not looking forward to either 1. Trump starting up with the annexation threats again once Carney takes office, or 2. Poilivra aligning with Trump and compromising the country once he is in power. However, the former is better than the latter. Story 30. I'm a bit concerned. The stakes are higher than ever. Logically, it feels like Poilivra has no chance to win, but we also thought the same about Trump, and we've seen how that turned out. Everyone, please fulfill your civic duty and vote. Story 31. Mark Carney was kind enough to save the British economy from collapse during Brexit, so thank you for that. Story 32. I am a Canadian immigrant of 20 years, originally from the United States. I am generally not too worked up about elections as they have been boring, and the platforms from both sides have largely been similar. The parties have been moderate and respectful of each other on the whole. I vote in every election cycle. I will be voting for Carney. It is time to bring an adult back into the room. I also have many concerns about the disrespect and rhetoric that Poilivra has introduced into the Canadian political sphere. Just because the United States is going down a rabbit hole of ideological extremism does not mean we need to follow them. While I do not believe Poilivra is going to be a dictator or anything like that, I think any attempts to push the envelope of basic civility must be met with full rejection from the Canadian people. The Conservative Party of Canada can return to the election stage once they have a serious candidate running. I voted for Harper 3 times and am very disappointed to see him supporting this. Ironically, for moderate conservatives, we do have a serious candidate. The humorous aspect of all this is that the right wing in Canada claims they have not moved further right at all, and that it is the Liberals who have shifted to the left. Meanwhile, we have a very traditional small c conservative running under the Liberal banner. If these individuals actually cared about conservatism in Canada, they would all be voting for Carney. It is another very concerning indicator that it is not about political positions but rather celebrating the kind of rhetoric and behavior that Poilivra is bringing with him. Overall, I am feeling disappointed with Canadians and their support for Poilivra. Story 33. As an American resident, even if you think you are going to win, vote anyway because you saw what happened here. Story 34. Yesterday, I spent 30 minutes waiting to vote early in Ontario to help ensure that an unpopular candidate does not have the opportunity to implement a lighter form of fascism in Canada. Story 35. Carney is stronger as a candidate than Hillary and Kamala were, and his credibility as the financial leader of 2 G8 countries during a trade war, without having a legislative record, makes him the unique candidate with a chance to win a Liberal majority. Story 36. Truly, my thoughts are, Carney received an unwarranted advantage. The individual would gladly become Barron's assistant at best. A vote for the new Democratic Party is unfortunately a meaningless vote. Story 37. It's pretty much a sure thing the Liberal Party of Canada will win. I don't like them, but I trust them more than the Conservative Party of Canada. I just can't wait for it to be over. Either way, my riding is going green, so I'll probably vote for them. Story 38. Hopeful. I believe Carney is the person we need for these challenging times, and I am confident he will secure a majority. Story 39. As long as Poilievre doesn't win, I'll be so happy. Anyone else would be better. I would honestly love for Jagmeet Singh to win. He would give Trump an aneurysm. Story 40. Anxious, I'm not able to vote, and I just hope we don't end up with the Canadian version of the Fantafascist as our Prime Minister. Story 41. I loved how many people were already at the voting station I went to yesterday morning, only 2.5 hours after advanced voting opened. Many people in my city's online community were talking about which stations had lines out the door and how long the wait had been. I will not be surprised if once the election is over, no matter who wins, the numbers show that a lot of us actually thought our vote mattered and showed up. I am feeling a little worried about the vote-splitting polls showing in some of my local ridings. I live in Alberta, and sadly, we are notoriously conservative, though luckily I reside in one of the small non-conservative areas that manage to survive here. But we are surrounded by a sea of conservative support, both provincially and federally. I used to be in a riding that, in the last federal election, ousted the long-time serving conservative candidate. We chose a new Democratic Party candidate and celebrated. This time around, our district lines were changed in 2023, with the addition of more ridings, and I am no longer in that riding. However, I have been paying attention to my former riding. The reigning new Democratic Party candidate there is showing numbers that are similar to the Liberal candidate, whereas Liberal numbers last time were fairly low but still respectable. Sadly, that same Conservative candidate from last time is running again, and while his numbers are consistent with last time, that puts him ahead of both the new Democratic Party and the Liberal candidate. Too many former new Democratic Party voters are switching to Liberal, causing the new Democratic Party to drop. I really hope voters there do a little more research before they vote. It's not as simple as just voting for the party. In my riding, my choice seems straightforward, as there were only 2 parties showing any sizable numbers, and I certainly was not voting Conservative. But if I were still in my old riding, I would be very stressed right now about voting. Story 42. It's stressful, and I'm not sure what the outcome will be for Canadians. I have never voted for the Liberal Party. I used to vote for the Conservative Party until the Harper administration took over. I voted for Layton because he seemed so genuine. Now, I am at a loss and will probably vote for the Liberal Party. Story 43. I'm tired of going back and forth between Liberal and Conservative governments. I want to see what a different party would do to mess up the country. Because in the end, we always complain about the current government ruining the country, regardless of who's in charge. My only real expectation of the federal government at this point is to do all they can to fight against former President Trump and separate ourselves from our trade dependency on the United States. I don't expect anyone to fix the economy, the housing problem, inflation, or any of the issues we face. The bar is low. Just keep Canada an independent country, and I'll be more or less satisfied while I complain about how they're failing the country. Story 44. I voted last week by mail. I have a Canada flag on my car. It is the first time in years that I felt I had to vote. I want the Liberals to defeat the Conservatives. Story 45. Anything to undermine that maple tin-peckered, two-faced individual ethically, I'm down for. I just voted and whispered against Trump to myself quietly as I marked my ballot. Story 46. Canada is about to have its main character moment. If Carney succeeds, we might actually see leadership that feels more authentic and less like reality television. Story 47. I don't trust any political party right now. I don't believe the Liberal Party has a genuine desire to address some of the major problems Canada is facing, and I don't think the Conservative Party has enough self-identity to stand firm in the trade war and the influence of former President Trump. Regardless of the candidate you are voting for, Canadians as a whole are a very stubborn people with a strong sense of identity. I just don't think either party truly has the best interests of Canadians at heart. Story 48. Thanks to Trudeau's actions on proportional representation, in my riding, vote splitting between the New Democratic Party and Liberal candidate may result in electing a genocide-denying, genocide-encouraging, Nazi propagandist, a fellow traveler in right-wing extremist ideology. I am not feeling good about it at all. It is difficult to instill respect for democratic institutions in children under these circumstances. Story 49. We cannot reason the Liberal critics out of their misery, but I am confident that the public will recognize that Carney has the best plan to address our challenges to the South and will vote accordingly. Story 50. People may not agree with me, but I am expressing my thoughts on how Trump might perceive our Prime Minister if the New Democratic Party were in power. I typically vote for the New Democratic Party, but this year I will be voting for the Liberal Party as a strategic choice. Can you imagine how Trump would view our Prime Minister if the New Democratic Party won? His racism might prevent him from seeing beyond skin color. The turban would only add to the burden. It is distressing to consider the names he would call Singh. Story 51. I am very worried. I don't trust the polls, and the convoy adjacent doesn't care if we turn into the United States. Pierre Poilievre speaks as if he is in 4th grade, so people mistakenly think he is smart. Mark Carney is clearly the leader we need during an economic crisis. Now we just have to wait and see if we deserve him. Story 52. I voted by mail. With Trump in the Oval Office and Poilievre's embrace of the extreme right and lack of anything resembling a coherent policy position beyond just and bad. Despite Trudeau's resignation as Prime Minister, I knew who would not get my support. Story 53. I believe Canada will realize that America is not the only country where elections can be influenced by external sources. Story 54. I'm distressed that it's even close. The politician is a disappointing figure, and he should only be getting votes from the small percentage of people who wish they were Americans. Instead, he is at the high end of the normal conservative range, and the only reason he likely won't win is that those of us on the left are holding our noses and voting for the Liberal Party to stop him. Story 55. Pretty anxious. I'm worried about the possibility of the political party winning and hope the polls are accurate. I voted today and heard that many people were there yesterday. Story 56. I believe Carney is the better choice for dealing with Trump, but I don't like him overall. I dislike that we have two conservative options and that my New Democratic Party vote in my Liberal riding will barely matter. Hopefully, a stronger, worker-oriented New Democratic Party can begin rising from the ashes after this. Story 57. I voted today and left the polling station smiling. My wife and I stood in a line of about 40 people. We were all strangers, each from different walks of life, cultures, and religious beliefs. It made me very proud to be Canadian. Get out there and vote. This is your right as a citizen and your chance to make your choice heard to shape Canada's future. Story 58. I have been trying to unpack why I am so supportive of Carney. Beyond just respecting his intelligence, experience, maturity, pragmatism, and vision, a large part of my support is because I was resigned to a Poilievre-led conservative government and quite anxious about that, especially after the US election. The hope I felt since January, when Carney started making the news, has come as a relief. While nothing is certain, I trust our reliable polling system in Canada. Poilievre is not Harper, who was Prime Minister when I was a young adult. I live in a conservative province and have been disgusted with my provincial government's continual mismanagement of healthcare and social services, its outright hostility towards our education system, and its significant shift towards culture war issues. Federally, I can only imagine what that would look like. My political consciousness and engagement began around the time of the 2011 election and Jack Layton's rise. However, this is by far the most I have ever paid attention to federal politics. I believe in social democracy and would love to see a resurgence of the New Democratic Party, but that is obviously not happening anytime soon. Federally, I have voted for the New Democratic Party and the Liberal Party about equally in my lifetime. When our country and the world are on more stable ground, I think a minority government with the Bloc and New Democratic Party influencing the Liberals would be beneficial. I also hope the conservatives can splinter from the reform side and return to being a progressive conservative party. However, as it stands, I very much hope for a liberal majority. Story 59. I feel like the situation is similar to how the world viewed the US election, where many believed it would easily result in a certain outcome. However, there is a very real threat that it could go another way, and people cannot sit idly by. In my opinion, we risk facing the same fate as the US, so let's learn from their mistakes. Story 60. It seems that if it were not for Donald Trump and his methods, Poilievre would have won by a landslide. Now Canadians want to distance themselves from the Trump mindset. Therefore, it appears that the Liberals, thanks to Trump and his loyal supporters, will win. Yes, of course, Trump wants the Conservatives to win, and therein lies the problem. Story 61. Terrified. I took for granted that logic would prevail in the United States, but it hasn't. I refuse to make any assumptions about this election, regardless of what polls say. I will be filled with anxiety until this is over. Story 62. I am frustrated and worried. I am on the train. I usually vote for the New Democratic Party or the Liberal Party. The conservative individuals within my immediate circle seem naive to the threat Pierre Poilievre actually poses. They are fixated on disliking Justin Trudeau and believe that Poilievre's proposed tax-free savings account increase is worth their vote. I am exhausted from trying to explain that they need to read between the lines more effectively. I do not know where our fact-checkers have gone, except for Rachel Gilmore. Poilievre just spews nonsense with no actual depth, and his associates lack critical thinking skills. Given the situation in the United States and the connections Poilievre has to J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, I genuinely think he would use his position to undermine our sovereignty and national security, among other things. Mark Carney has the strongest resume and the most experience for the challenges we are currently facing. Story 63. The majority of elections are decided by low-information individuals who vote based on random, minor issues or emotional reasons. Every election, they seem to reset their memories and completely forget about the last time they voted, when they were misled by overpromises and under-delivery. Yet, somehow, they continue to buy into whatever is being sold, holding on to a blind optimism that this time will be different. But it is never different. It is always the same. I'm feeling a bit pessimistic here. Story 64. There is significant dislike for the current political leadership. While I acknowledge that Carney has an impressive resume, I am skeptical about trusting the Liberals to change their approach after 9 years in power. Cutting taxes provides individuals the opportunity to allocate their funds as they see fit. If you wish to help others, consider donating. However, for the millions of Canadians struggling with bills and housing costs, an additional 15% would have a substantial impact. Although Carney has promised to implement similar measures, it is not feasible to lower taxes while simultaneously increasing spending without accumulating more national debt. In summary, if you rely on government support, it is understandable that you would prefer the current leadership. However, if you seek to build a better life for yourself rather than relying on financial assistance for others, the decision is clear. Story 65. I'm calmed a little by the apparent large turnout for early voting, and that at least near me, people aren't assuming the best outcome, a Carney win. I will be voting on the 28th for Carney, and I truly hope he wins. I don't want us to experience what happened in the United States with disengaged voters not showing up. Story 66. I don't know what Canadians need for themselves internally. However, I believe they require a leader who will stand up to Trump and not tolerate his behavior. Story 67. Given that I had to wait 40 minutes in line for advance polling yesterday, I have seen shorter lines on election day. I hope Canadians turn out in record numbers to send a message that we are not interested in American-style leadership and should turf Pierre Poilievre to the curb where he belongs. Story 68. The Liberal Party of Canada is projected to win a majority without needing to compromise with the New Democratic Party. I believe that Carney will be competent enough in his role to address most of the issues that have been developing over the last few years and to firmly align Canada with the democratic bloc of countries. Story 69. As an American, I hope Mark gets elected because he is just another authoritarian like Trump. He doesn't like people disappearing and constantly makes fun of and belittles others, like when he mocked a man for being short. I call him Mark Carnage because he told Trump to shove it and stands up for what he believes. He made Trump come to him and didn't back down. He is a strong individual and will be well liked by Canadians. It will always be the Gulf of Mexico. Russia started the war, and Canada will never be the 51st state. I hope we can impeach Trump so we can get rid of him and his administration before the situation escalates further. Story 70. I'm scared, to be honest. It's between a person who has demonstrated competence and someone who believes they are capable but has not accomplished anything significant in their entire career. So it's essentially a perfect reflection of the American election. I can only hope that we have learned from it. Story 71. I hope our neighbors to the north do not follow the actions we have taken in the United States. If you elect that candidate, you too will become influenced by extreme ideologies. Please reconsider, you will regret it. Story 72. Ambivalent, not to be confused with apathetic, refers to strong feelings in opposition. I detest the liberals and the conservatives and have expressed this sentiment for many years by simply not voting because I didn't want to participate in the system. I began voting again a while back, always choosing the New Democratic Party or the Green Party, knowing full well it's a waste of my time. As long as first past the post exists in my country, nothing is ever going to change. Another reason I dislike the Liberal Party of Canada is that they promised to abolish it if they won back in 2015 but changed their minds as soon as they gained a majority. Now, I think I must vote for Carney. There is no other option. The Conservative Party of Canada needs to be stopped. They are harmful. However, I really don't think Carney is going to make anything better. He just isn't going to make things worse like Pierre-Paul Hivier would. As such, I'm probably just going to go back to not voting. I don't care anymore. I'm 36 and feel 76. Story 73. I am frustrated because I do not believe any of the political parties will improve anything. I feel I need to vote for the Liberal Party to keep the Conservative Party out of power. Story 74. Frustrated with the first past the post system. Unlike the United States, Canada has 5 major political parties. I support the New Democratic Party overall, but I will be voting strategically for the Liberal Party because the New Democratic Party has little chance of winning in my riding. Story 75. I'm hopeful. I'm voting today. Poilievre has been too quiet on the threats to our sovereignty. His main focus seems to be that Canada is broken. However, we are coming together to boycott Trump, and he just wants us to forget about the issues and repeat his talking points about ideology or create silly nicknames like carbon tax Carney. The carbon tax is gone. Trudeau is not in the room anymore. Story 76. I will be voting for Carney. There is no doubt in my mind after seeing years of Poilievre criticize Trudeau and court right-wing extremists. It's concerning because Carney seems like the kind of candidate who would have been considered a conservative 15 years ago. After witnessing the rapid shift of the Overton window in American politics, I am worried that the same may be occurring here, albeit more slowly. I am also tired of voting Liberal instead of for genuinely left-wing candidates, but what can you do? Carney is the right choice for today, and I look forward to supporting more progressive candidates in future elections once the current administration is removed. Story 77. I hope the number of eligible voters who participate is very high. Regardless of the outcome, it is better when a majority speaks up. Canada averages a 70% voter turnout, which is good. I hope you achieve above 75%. Here, we generally have over 80% turnout, and this positively impacts the results. Whether people like the outcome or not, it is a democratic election, and the majority has spoken. Story 78. I am confident they will deliver another defeat to the global assault on democratic systems currently being conducted by populist, nativist, and fundamentalist conservatism. Story 79. It feels like choosing between an ex-boyfriend who has been abusing you for years but claims he will change and a new boyfriend with many warning signs. Story 80. Pretty optimistic for my Canadian friends. When you're primed to win seats in Alberta of all places, you're golden. Story 81. I would vote for the People's Party of Canada, but I know there is no chance of them ever winning, so it is conservative despite the many things I disagree with Pierre on. Story 82. I voted on the first open day at the elections office, which I believe was weeks ago. You poor individuals voting at the advanced polls and even worse on election day. It's going to be a mess. Story 83. Already voted. If the polls are remotely accurate, I will be extremely ungracious and gloat. Story 84. Nervous, like how I felt before the American election. I hope Canadians will prove they are smarter. Story 85. I voted yesterday at the early polls. I had to wait in line, which is the first time that has happened in the last 3 elections. I was voting early to avoid lines on the 28th. I hope it continues and people vote on the 28th as well. This is an important election, and everyone needs to exercise their right to vote. Story 86. The main 2 parties scare me, especially the Conservatives with plans to use the notwithstanding clause and the creation of a 3-strike system. They are openly admitting to trampling the Charter of Rights. I haven't trusted the Liberals to do the right thing since the lack of action regarding the promise of electoral reform. After watching the debate, when Carney claimed it was the Liberals who created dental care, I was frustrated as it was actually the New Democratic Party. There is too much corporate money in the background, while members of Parliament pander to lobbyists, ignoring the needs of regular citizens. Key issues include climate action, housing, healthcare, monopolistic industries. I expect another minority government will lead to sore losers throwing a hissy fit, forcing us back to the polls in another wasteful election in 2 years. I am tired of stagnant government policies that get undone as we flip-flop between 2 parties. We need proportional representation. Story 87. I am an independent, so I consider both sides based on what I think is beneficial to the country in question. Although I am from the United States, I have observed that the Liberal Party has significantly benefited Canada for years. However, towards the end, I believe they started making mistakes that caused harm to Canada. I would like to see Pierre Poilievre make some changes that would hopefully benefit Canada. This could lead to the generation of more positive ideas by the Liberal Party, creating a back-and-forth progression as Canada improves. Clearly, Canada needs more affordable homes, higher gross domestic product per capita, and improvements in quality of life. Although Canada took a slight dip, it is generally known for being one of the best countries to live in. There is no reason for Canada's gross domestic product per capita not to be on par with that of the United States. Canada has strong industries, universities, and abundant resources. This is just my opinion. Please do not attack me. Story 88. Long waits at my polling station yesterday, but this morning it only took me 45 minutes. This election is too important to skip. Story 89. I am working the advanced poll and have been very excited about the turnout and enthusiasm. It is going to be a close contest, and I am glad people are showing up to vote. Story 90. I heard the 2 men behind me when I voted talking about the volunteer and how, since she's British, she shouldn't be here. This is just disgusting. She's a citizen like the rest of us. This only shows how uncivilized and barbaric some people are and brings us closer to the United States. Story 91. Personally, I think Carney has a well-defined explanation of how he will reinvigorate Canada's economy. We were essentially subsidizing the United States with our energy and minerals instead of utilizing them at home. If Poilievre gets in, I expect some appeasement and being put on Washington's leash. The man just keeps repeating rehearsed scripts. I don't think there is any depth of understanding on his part. He says what he thinks the voter wants to hear and nothing more. It is going to be a high-stakes election that will define Canada for the next 100 years. Story 92. Either we remain a country or we become the 51st American state. I will ensure it is the former. The Liberals have held office for too long, but I do not trust the Conservatives, and the New Democratic Party does not have the numbers to beat them. Story 93. Hopeful that the Liberal Party did such a poor job over the past 10 years that perhaps people will think critically and choose not to vote for them again. Story 94. I am really scared. In my province, there was an anti-trans youth bill that had the potential to out students to abusive anti-trans parents if they wanted to use their name and pronouns at school. I had to come out before I was outed. I am really scared that one of my friends will be hurt if this kind of thing comes back. Many of my trans friends are already struggling with suicidal thoughts, and many are more afraid of their parents finding out they are trans than anyone could even imagine. I do not know what to do. I do not want to lose my people. Story 95. I will follow this up with a second question. Have the last 10 years of liberal leadership improved your lives? Story 96. I am concerned about the situation in the United States. I do not want to lose my rights because some people want change that may not benefit anyone and could make me unhappy as a Canadian. Story 97. I am worried about our growing oligarchy. Tobias Lucky has been showing his true colors. I want small businesses to boycott Shopify and move to other platforms. Shopify is like a cancer, and I am tired of his agenda. Otherwise, I am just hoping we get the normal guy, Carney. To the Conservatives, Carney was the governor of the Bank of Canada during the Harper government. Then he was recruited to England to save their economy. He was trusted by Conservatives. Voting for Pierre Poilievre is against Canada's interests. So please do your research and stop listening to sensationalized videos. Story 98. I am proud of our country and potential leaders. The debates were conducted respectfully, and although I did not always agree with the candidates, I felt I could hear them clearly. They mostly stayed on topic, which I appreciate. The debates were fairly boring, which is how they should be. I am also grateful that the election process is short. I am tired of the uncertainty and just want it to be over. Canadians, please vote. Story 99. The unfortunate aspect of the anti-parent and pro-organization comments is that all the automated ones are funded by our tax dollars. Story 100. Someone just posted a yearbook photo on Threads from her sister's graduating class. She went to high school with Carney. This is what he wrote in her sister's yearbook. Dear Viv, you did a terrific job on this yearbook. It was a pleasure to have you in my English class. Unfortunately, seating arrangements did not allow for conversation. Best of luck in the future. Love, Mark Carney. He was also very cute. Story 101. I fear that the focus on the disruptive individuals south of us has distracted us from other important issues. While the opposition was never going to address the issues, the governing party should be pressured to deliver meaningful change. We need to consider preferential voting systems, strengthening healthcare, improving infrastructure, addressing the cost of living, tackling foreign interference, examining the massive influence of social media on politics, and reforming the catch-and-release judicial system, all of which have been overlooked due to our need to defend ourselves from former President Trump's outbursts. Story 102. Optimistic. I believe Carney will secure a majority government. My polling stations are very busy. I think people realize this is a crucial election. Story 103. My riding is likely going to support the Conservative candidate, even though I personally did not vote for them. My riding has consistently elected Conservative candidates for as long as I can remember. Apparently, yesterday my city set a record for the number of advance votes cast. I hope this indicates that many people do not want the Conservatives in office, but I am preparing to be disappointed. However, I am hopeful that Pierre does not win the position of Prime Minister. I cannot stand him or the supporters of the extreme right. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.